Welcome back. We're going to turn our focus now to the negotiations between the United States and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Last June, Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un had a historic meeting in Singapore, but despite great anticipation, there hasn't been much clear progress towards denuclearization. Now the two leaders are scheduled to meet again next month, although they haven't officially announced the location of the second summit. All signs point to Vietnam. To discuss the ramifications, we still have with us Paolo Von Schirach, the president of the Global Policy Institute, Morgan Muchnick, a Republican strategist and founder of the M2 Group from Beijing, the senior fellow at the Pangoal Institution, Qinduo Xu, and we welcome to our studio for this part of the show Brian Becker, an analyst on U.S. DPRK relations, who's visited the DPRK on several occasions. Brian, let me start with you for this part of the show. So we have this meeting coming up, possibly Vietnam, most likely Vietnam, next month. What are expectations?
Well, I think the expectations are muted in Washington, and you have instruments of great influence like the Center for Strategic and International Studies making announcements just yesterday and today designed to dampen expectations. But I think actually there's great promise in these negotiations. I think the historic summit in Singapore was just that. It was historic. No American head of state has met with the North Korean head of state. That created momentum, and you see on the ground between North and South Korea a dynamic shift in relations. I think that in and of itself gives the whole process momentum. It's really anchored more or less in Korea, although Donald Trump has given it a green light, a requisite because of the nature of U.S.-South Korea relations.
Brian, I get your point about the historic nature of the meeting, but on the core issue of denuclearization, we haven't seen much progress, have we?
There were 4 points in the Singapore summit. Number one was the improvement of U.S. DPRK relations. Right. That was number one. That was North Korea's negotiating demand. That was their precondition. They say number two is an instrument for peace, a peace mechanism on the Korean Peninsula. Number three, only number three, is denuclearization, and then it must be comprehensive. So what's the goal? The United States wants comprehensive, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. North Korea wants an end to the Korean War. In order to denuclearize, if there is a prospect for it, and maybe there's not, but if there's any prospect, there must be first the end of the Korean War. Otherwise, this is a no-starter for North Korea.
Morgan, Vice President Mike Pence here in the United States, he's been talking about the upcoming summit. Let's listen to what he had to say.
There will be a second summit, and at that summit, we'll be laying out our expectation for North Korea to take concrete steps to begin to make real the denuclearization that Kim Jong-un committed to. And again, the president's very optimistic.
So, Morgan, what is your take on this? I mean, there is one view, this was a view that was put forward by the news company Bloomberg, which said that very little progress had been made, and the change that had taken place was cosmetic.
Well, the change that has taken place, like my previous guest has said, is real, but the change related to denuclearization is true, it's cosmetic. That hasn't happened. Right. And I do think, though, that President Trump has shifted his point of view about going in the beginning saying nukes have to be laid out, taken apart, we can stand in front of them with a big picture with everything done before we sort of do anything for real. I think that's sort of gone. I do think that irrespective of the nuclear situation, you can negotiate an end to the Korean War. I think that's quite viable. I mean, just take a second and take a step back. In 2 years of this president's term, he's on the precipice of ending the Korean War without any shots fired. I mean, that's incredible. Now, it's true, the expectations for complete and utter denuclearization is going to be quite a feat. But my God, to begin the process like this and move that direction, that's great. And it's far better than what was in place under any administration of either Republican or Democratic leadership going back decades, multiple decades.
Right. Qinduo Xu, Kim Jong-un, the DPRK leader, he has been holding talks with Chinese leaders in China. How are these upcoming talks between the United States and the DPRK being seen in Beijing?
Well, for Beijing, it fully supports North Korean side. Actually, it encouraged North Korea to go into the next round of summit with President Trump. Because on this issue, China and the United States actually share the same goal, that is the nuclear-free peninsula, which is critical to the stability in this region and, of course, to both the U.S. and China. So in this respect, China would love to see more concrete progress in terms of disarming the North Korean side of nuclear weapons over there. But at the same time, China understands there is a need of incentive, there's a need of further encouragement from Washington. For Washington, somehow Chinese people would say you cannot wait with North Korea to continue to do more to damage its nuclear facilities one piece by another, while Washington remains, there's no lack of action, say, in Washington. So I agree with a previous speaker that, for Washington, what about jointly declaring the end of Korean War, to lay down the foundation for further destruction of nuclear weapons on the North Korean side. I think there's a need of something specific also from Washington to encourage North Korea to do more.
Paolo, I guess, as Qinduo points out, it's a matter of how this process rolls out, isn't it? I mean, the North Koreans or the DPRK waiting for the United States to lift some of the sanctions before it does anything more. I mean, is that fair? Is that valid?
Well, look, who knows? I mean, we'll find out what transpires when the summit takes place. Maybe there is the U.S. side, I'm sure, is preparing its own agenda. I fully agree that changing the political atmosphere in the peninsula, if this is done in a really dramatic way, is a game changer by itself. And that may place North Korean nuclear weapons in a different perspective. In other words, right now, because at least until recently, with this sort of belligerent tone that was coming from Pyongyang, the fact that they had indeed, they have nuclear weapons, and it seems the delivery systems to potentially hit even the United States, maybe not now, but in the future, was highly destabilizing. If the atmospherics are changed and there is this rapprochement between North and South Korea, and the United States takes some steps and maybe remove some sanctions and what have you, and yes, we can get to the, I'm not sure if symbolically declaring the end of the war, which was the armistice was 1953, if I'm not mistaken, so it's long overdue. Yep, it's cosmetic, but it's also, helpful in changing the atmosphere. Can America do more to satisfy these concerns of North Korea? Yes. On the other hand, the sticky point will remain the actual denuclearization. I am not sure if we will ever get to that, because I've never seen a country having nuclear weapons and then giving them up, except
South Africa did.
Well, they didn't have weapons.
And Libya sort of did.
Yeah, come on.
Let's not forget Ukraine.
Ukraine had a piece of the Soviet arsenal. I haven't seen
Ukraine, right.
So this is, South Africa didn't have an arsenal, and certainly didn't, Libya had a container worth of stuff, so that's not much of anything.
Okay.
So the point is, will there be, can both sides get entirely what they want? I'm not sure, but if the situation in the peninsula is stabilized in a way that it is satisfactory to all, then the role of nuclear weapons is decreased.
Okay.
And you asked a great question about what's sort of in it for North Korea. What's the sort of incentive for that? You talked about possibly lessening up sanctions and like. Yeah. I will promise you and the world, whoever's watching this, that if North Korea takes positive steps towards actual tangible denuclearization, the money will flood in. There will be ships, planes, credit, cryptocurrencies will be raining down like manna from the heavens.
But didn't Western powers say the same thing to Libya? You get rid of your nuclear program in that case. We'll restore relations.
And John Bolton said, yeah, let's have the Libya model. Well, the DPRK said, well, no, thank you. The head of state ended up assassinated.
Brian, do you share this optimism that Brian is?
I do share it, because what we see is palpable changes in the Korean Peninsula. The reason the ending of the Korean War is so significant is it means that the UN no longer exercises any degree of sovereignty over Korea. Right now, the UN command, which is the United States with a different banner, just said no to a north-south rail link. Now, that means that South Korea starts to get back its sovereignty. It's a very limited sovereignty. If the South Korean government chooses to do as Moon Jae-in wants to do, which is to integrate with North Korea at some level, that means the entire political equation changes.
Yeah.
Just getting, countries have nuclear weapons, but that doesn't mean they use them.
Yeah.
Having nuclear weapons isn't the end of the day. The thing really is what kind of regime exists, meaning a peace regime or a war regime on the Korean Peninsula.
And Libya didn't have a country right next to it wanting to help it the way South Korea does with North Korea. They're ready to do it.
Okay. Qinduo, the United States and China may have its differences over trade, but in this particular issue, the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula, what are the prospects of them working together?
I think they are working together. China is playing along with the United States in terms of, for example, imposing sanctions on North Korea. Remember, more than 90% of North Korean foreign trade going through China. So China plays a critical role. China deserves the credit for sticking to the sanctions closely. So that's, a lot of people would say that's what North Korea is giving, basically some of the room in terms of negotiation. So I think people should understand that China wants to achieve the similar goal with the United States.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat, but the conversation continues online. Join us on CGTN America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on Twitter at CGTN America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.